My name is Karen Orozco Gutierrez. I am the great-granddaughter of Milton Howard, and in honor of the Juneteenth celebration this weekend, I'm going to talk a little bit about my great-grandfather, Milton Howard, who was an African-American man here in Davenport, Iowa. Milton Howard was born in about 1851 in Muscatine County, Iowa. He and his biological family were kidnapped and sold into slavery to an Alabama planter named Albert James Pickett in Montgomery when Milton was just 2 years old. Milton and his family worked at the Pickett plantation until he was about 10 years old when Pickett died. And when Pickett died, Milton was separated from his family forever and sold to an Arkansas planter named Howard. When the Civil War broke out, Milton said in his pension application that a crowd of them ran off, and so child Milton and others escaped slavery. So Milton said that in his pension application also that a Union soldier brought Milton back to Iowa after he escaped. And they had to travel through the Ozark Mountains in Arkansas and Missouri, and they were being chased by bloodhounds, so they had to hide underwater and breathe through a hollow reed. He was only about 11 years old at this time. So Milton and the Union soldier made it back to Iowa. Milton decided to enlist. He enlisted in what is now known as the 1st Iowa Colored Infantry, Company F. Originally as a soldier boy or drummer boy because he was so young. Later on, he did see battle at Wallace's Ferry, Big Creek, Arkansas. Milton suffered multiple physical wounds, which he carried with him the rest of his life. Milton told his family that when he was discharged from the Army, he and a white man named Murphy made their way back north. That was at the end of 1865. Then in March of 1866, Milton started a 50-year career working at the Rock Island Arsenal. There are many lessons to be learned from Milton Howard's story. He had to go through many unusual experiences as a child, and he survived them all. And then when he became an adult, he used to his advantage his work ethic and his sweat equity, and he was able to provide for his family. One of the things that I admire about my great-grandfather is that he had more than a positive attitude. He woke up every day trying to figure out how he could help his fellow man more than the day before. Everyone said that about him, and I do admire my great-grandfather for that. He was also a family man. He was reportedly an ordained minister, a ward alderman, and a civic leader. He was a father of at least a dozen children. He survived He survived 3 of his wives and buried 2 of them, and buried about 6 children. He always worked. He worked a long time at the Arsenal. He and 3 other of his fellow co-workers were rewarded with a gold star after they had completed their 50 years and gifted with a trip to the Aberdeen Proving Ground in Baltimore, Maryland. Sometimes Milton Howard worked 2 jobs. One of the things that I found unusual, that right here at this spot, Milton Howard built a home in 1919, and he had it completely paid off by the time that he died. But before he bought this home, the Milton Howard family had to were forced to move to different apartments for at least 20 times. He overcame a lot of adversities. As a young age, he learned French at the Pickett plantation, and then later on, he learned German and Italian. So he was known throughout the Davenport as being multilingual. He did not go to school and did not go to college, but he was educated in the languages. Um, it's important for us to preserve his history because there's so many lessons to be learned from it. He was born nearly 180 years ago, but he was able to overcome obstacles that we today are going through and were able to learn from. So, and it's also important that Black history is American history. It should not be, Black people have been in this country even before the first Africans came to Jamestown in 1619, and even before the settlers came from England to settle the colonies. So we've always been around. It's important that we preserve the history. It may not seem to be important. It should be not swept under the rug. It should not be ignored, and it should be taught to everyone. And how it's important for the larger white community is that Milton Howard, the things that happened to him happened to him. A lot of it happened to him as a child, and he was an Iowa child. He was born here. He was born a free child of color, and his life would have been a lot different had he and his family not been kidnapped.